Welcome to the Week in Politics with Michelle Grattan. My name is Nick Klomp. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor here at the University of Canberra, and I'm sitting in the chair for the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Stephen Parker. Michelle, Bill Shorten has asked to appear as soon as possible at the Royal Commission into Union Corruption to answer questions about his time as the head of the Australian Workers' Union. Is this a smart tactic from him?
I think it is. I think it was the only tactic really available to him. He had been asked to appear at the Commission in August, September, but to leave it that long, given that the newspapers have been pursuing a whole lot of deals that were made under his stewardship when he was head of the Australian Workers' Union, and given the general publicity now around this issue, he needs to clear it away as soon as he can and as best he can.
He's now due to face the Royal Commission, I understand, on July 8, which is still a few weeks away, and yet even overnight there's been some more damaging allegations. Has the damage already been done? Some damage has
already been done, there's no doubt about that, because people will say, oh well, if he's been asked to appear, where there's smoke there must be some fire, and they won't necessarily listen to his detailed answers on these issues. But the question is how much damage will be done, and that will depend to a very large degree on whether he can explain adequately why companies made payments to the union, and he can dispel any allegation that he put the interests of the union ahead of the interests of the workers in deals.
The Greens have done a deal with the government to pass changes to the pension with a toughened assets test. In exchange for this, the government has extended the period for submissions to the tax white paper by 6 weeks, I understand, and has broadened it so it looks more intensively at retirement income. Who's got the better end of that trade-off?
Oh, undoubtedly the government's got the better end of the trade-off. This is a very important saving, some $2.4 billion over the forward estimates. It's a good result for Scott Morrison, who's turned out to be a very skilled negotiator, and it does mean that there are long-term structural changes put into place. Now, the Greens have got some more attention in the tax inquiry onto retirement income. They wanted a full inquiry, that wasn't on. The government says it's not going to change superannuation regardless of what comes out of this inquiry, but still the Greens have got something, and their leader Richard Di Natale was saying the other day, well, even if the government's not going to do anything, if the inquiry produces a good critique, it's there for the future. It's there for some government to act on. So from their point of view, there's something in it, and also the new leader has made himself look reasonable, somebody who is willing to trade, and I think that this has been a useful contrast with a more intransigent position that the Greens have adopted in the past.
So looks like a win for the government. The Greens have got a little bit. Has this left Labor out in the cold on this issue?
To some extent, because people have said, well, this is bad policy. It looks like Labor's simply defending the rich, and that pension rationalisation was needed, but there is some strategy behind this from Labor's point of view. It is appealing to people who are not on pensions but actually in the pre-pension stage. In other words, workers in their 50s, early 60s, it's saying, well, this change will mean that people in fairly modest situations will be worse off when they reach retirement age. So it's tapping into the fear factor, if you like.
Labor seems to have withdrawn its in-principle support for the government's controversial decision to strip the citizenships of dual citizen foreign fighters. Yet the Prime Minister is insisting that he will introduce the bill to Parliament as early as next week. What does this mean for the future of the legislation?
I think it's not clear yet where Labor will end up. It's expressing doubts about the fact that the decision-making in this bill would be in the hands of the Minister rather than following a court decision. and that, of course, has been something that Malcolm Turnbull's been concerned about as well. But where Labor actually falls on this legislation, I think we'll have to wait till we see the fine print of it, and also it will go to the Parliamentary Committee on Security and Intelligence, and that committee often does hammer out compromises. Now, I think the question in this case is whether Tony Abbott would want a compromise, or whether he would want the government members of that committee to take a very tough line and not be willing to recommend changes.
It's a fascinating space. Michelle Grattan, thank you again.
Thanks, Nick.